And I finally said, where is the most stupid place I could have possibly put them? And it was in a coat pocket because I took them out of the car, put them in a coat pocket.
Okay, so are we on? Okay, here we are with Linda Joy Meyer, my author. She's been writing a book, and we're going to talk about her book tonight. Very interesting, very good stuff, historical fiction. And Linda, please tell us about your book. Let's start it right off.
Okay. It's called The Forger of Marseille, and it takes place it starts in Berlin, actually, with two Jewish people who are in danger in Hitler's Germany, and they decide to go to Paris, where they're going to be safe, right? But the war comes at them, and they end up fleeing Paris during the fall of France and the exodus to Marseille. And then they find out about what's going on in what's called then Vichy France, run by the collaborationist government, and all these people who are in danger because they're anti-fascists, they're artists, they're intellectuals. And there are some people who are rescuing those people, and I got really interested in that story.
So tell us a little bit, Linda, about all the research that went into this. When did it start, and when did you commit?
The inspiration story is wonderful.
That's right.
I think it's a fascinating story.
Thank you. Well, I first read about Varian Fry, an American journalist who came to France with, get this, $3,000 taped to his leg, sent by the Emergency Rescue Committee to rescue many of these famous people who were on what was called the Surrender on Demand list. And that was a phrase in the armistice that required the French to turn over to Germany anybody that they asked for, meaning they could just turn over anyone to them. And so all these people were in danger of being either put in a camp or sent to Germany and executed. It was pretty intense. And I didn't know about this.
Excuse me for 1 minute.
So the reading that I did about Varian Fry, the American, and the era showed me how much was going on that most of us really don't know about. You know, it's
there's so many stories that we'll still never know.
Well, there's that too. You know, still a lot of secrets having to do with the with the resistance in general and the early resistance in this case. But you know, it was on pain of death. There were literally red cardboard signs all over Marseille with a noose on them, threatening death to anyone who helped save refugees, which is a rather intense thing to find out
That's
about.
so unimaginable. Can you imagine walking around like Point Richmond or anywhere and seeing signs with a noose threatening people that are helping refugees?
It's
just unfathomable to most of us.
It totally is, and from the point of view of the government, these people are traitors. So, you know, but still, most of the population was not doing this, but a few brave people did. So I began to read like 100, 200, 300, whatever, a large number of books. And in the back of each book is a bibliography that lists other books that talk about the similar subject. So it's sort of this chain of one book leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And sometimes you just get one or two really interesting facts or sentences out of a book, but then
that leads you to want to learn more about another aspect or another character.
I know. I mean, it really was very addictive, frankly.
Yes.
Kind of
the
rabbit hole of research.
No, I get how that could be because I got into kind of a phase there where I was just reading not nonfiction books, but reading a bunch of historical nonfiction, all based on like World War II era. Like you just
it's pretty fascinating. You know, it shows the resilience of us humans because being pushed in a situation like that, how do you react? You know, everybody has a story, and I think it's fascinating that you've zoned in on this and created these characters that will give us a little insight
like
to
you
how
literally created a world. Like
yes, you know, and suspense,
have to do
fear.
Yeah. Well,
Love story.
all
Tell us
these
there's a love
people in
story.
Europe ended up in Marseille because it was the only open port as the Germans
Yeah.
overtook France. And people hoped they could get out through Marseille. Well, the Germans shut down the port pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So then the only way out of France was over the Pyrenees on one side or over to Switzerland on the other side. And so my story takes place with people trying to rescue people over the Pyrenees, which I did visit, though I didn't climb.
Well, that's another thing that makes, I think, this book so authentic is that you were there. You were in some of these spaces. You felt that energy. What happened?
Like you literally traveled the road that they had
and
to travel.
translated it for us as the reader. So I think that's fascinating.
Well, I believe that that energy is left in a place where things happen.
I believe that too.
you
I do
know?
too.
And so I stood on the road on the border of France and Spain and thought about the Spanish refugees that had flooded over that border.
Right.
And something happened then that got me to actually decide to write the
Yes,
book.
tell us about that, please.
Do you want to share that story?
I know. Well, I'd written a version, and I'd done lots of research by the time I got there. This was in 2018. And I went to France with a girlfriend, and we did Paris, and we came down to the south. And I'm standing there by myself looking at this memorial about the Spanish people who were fleeing Franco. And they crawled in the snow and the ice over this road. So the wind was blowing, and I was standing there just sort of contemplating the history that I'd read about. And this voice started talking in my ear. I looked around. There's nobody there. And so this character started talking to me and saying, well, you really need to write our story, the story about the Spanish Civil War and the people who were escaping Franco and, and the terror and the loss and what they went through when they got into France and what happened to all these people. And he said, then he said his name was Cesar, and then he said that my female character needed him to help her in the book. I'm like, okay.
And then the journey begins.
How to get him introduced, and then to think about. And I didn't know. I knew about the Spanish Civil War, and I'd read some books already, which is why I knew enough to stand there and sort of appreciate the history. But so I read some of them some more and really try to figure out. Okay, a man like that, would his story be in Spain? Who was he in Spain? And, what was his family like? And so you just have to imagine this person being a whole person and that they have a background and a childhood and an education and all these things. So I got a little bit of help with that from somebody who, he was a friend of a woman that I know who wrote her book about the Spanish Civil War. So she had this other friend, and so online I just said, can you please read some of this? I'm not a Catalan man in 1940, and I don't know if I get it okay? Was it okay, And he put his stamp of approval on it. It didn't bother him. I mean, I would have heard from him if something was really off. So you have to go through, I think it helps to validate if your imagination is also going to work for a work of historical
was the actual
fiction.
reality, yeah.
Yeah.
Of
And you did a
course,
ton
yeah.
of research to make sure you got things accurate. I know that.
I kind of went down the research rabbit hole. A friend of mine calls it research rapture, where you're like, oh, look at that. Oh, did you know that? Oh my God, I have to put this in. Oh, and then
And you'd have a 1,000-page long book.
well, it could have been, but I luckily had help in not doing that with an editor and some friends who said, the characters need to come first. You didn't need to really, what are they doing? What is their struggle? And and it's my first novel, so I'm new at making things up. I've written memoir. I know what happened. I was there. I lived it, but how to make people who are, that you're making up, make them seem real, which is the challenge, the fun, and sometimes the pain of doing it.
Oh, I can imagine so, yes. But I think it's amazing how this Cesar character came to you, and I feel like it was a story that had to be told. I mean, we talked about energy. I think there was energy,
Yeah.
and that translated to the author, 'cause that's what I call her, my author, exactly what needed
She's
to be
our
done.
Linda.
Exactly what needed to be done. Somebody whispered in your ear, and look at you, you took it on.
Well, you can't ignore a character that whispers in your ear, for heaven's sake.
I wonder how many writers have had this experience,
Many.
or is it unique?
Really?
No, many.
Really?
They write it, they talk about it, they write about it. I mean, if you're in the
Yeah.
world of
Wow.
writers and authors, I've heard it many times. Also stories about how the character takes over and doesn't
Wow.
let them do this and doesn't let them do that.
It's
and they
almost like
have
a spirit
a
of
life
someone.
of their
Right.
own, you know. And I didn't have anybody do a takeover exactly, but I mean, certainly I had no thought of writing about a Spanish Catalan man until he whispered in my ear. And then I'm like, okay, well, who is he? Who could
Yeah.
he be? What could he have done? And then how will he interact with my 19-year-old female character? And so I had fun writing, and I wrote the early draft of them meeting in Paris at a cafe several years ago. That was my first draft. And of course, you go through many, as you know. I
Of
came in and
course,
talked to you
right.
about it. Many drafts. But essentially, that meeting stayed the same. It had the little
Interesting.
kernel of little
Yeah.
buzz, you know,
So that was kind of the spark that led to
Yeah.
the whole novel.
that led to their relationship, like falling in love. And
I think that's nice. You even got a love story wrapped in there, and everybody loves the good love story, right? Imagine a love story in that era, in that time, with that fear, with
Right.
that around you. Again, energy around you, right? And to fall in love and to...
Well, she finds out he's doing some illegal things in Paris. I'm not going to say what.
Yes, you have to
Yeah, you
read the
don't wanna
book.
spoil the book. No
Speaking
spoilers.
of that, we're going to have a big launch party for her when the book is actually physically out in our hands, and that's in July.
22nd.
22nd.
3
She
p.m.
had to remind me, the 22nd at 3 p.m. So if you come down here, we will have books you can buy. You can talk to the author
It'll be
herself.
a party. It's happening.
She'll sign your book
French
for
themed,
you,
of
which
course.
is, yes. We're going to go all out for this because I feel like I've been on this journey
Baguettes
with
and
Linda.
berets and
Well, we didn't talk about how much you were involved. I mean, and Liza, you too.
Well,
you know.
we like to read, so it was so easy for us to get hooked quickly.
That's how we bonded with Linda.
I
over our
came
love
to
of
the
books.
Grape Nest
Yes.
and talked about my book every week and my process
and
and
she
my
was working.
my successes and my like, oh my God, you can't believe today. I just didn't really you know, like, or I had to really change
That's
this
where
or
the
that.
wine comes in. This is what I do. It's a magical elixir.
really
I had to come have a
helped.
glass of wine after a long day of writing or
Yes.
editing.
And enjoy a glass of wine. I feel like everybody after a long day needs a glass of wine.
Is there wine featured in the book?
Well, it's not
Good
featured.
question.
Good question.
I
Not
wish.
featured, but
Good question.
We'll see, except I do want to put the caveat in that this is a time of rationing, and the collaborationist government made laws about
Right.
alcohol and how much you could have and what days you could have it.
well, and didn't the Nazis like take over a lot of the wineries?
Oh yeah, they took over a lot of the wineries. They shipped a lot of wine to, you know, to Germany, and they took over the wineries and destroyed a lot of them. So yeah, there's a book. Well, Wine and War. Yeah, we
Right. It
talked
was a
about that book.
great book.
Yeah.
Linda gave me a book to read, and it was quite fascinating. Just the loss that they took, you know.
I think I read
French
that.
wine is literally their heart and soul, and what better way to attack than with their wine?
Oh no,
You know?
the book I'm thinking about was The Winemaker's Wife.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
book.
I
Yeah,
think you
that's-
might have given that.
I
to
have
me.
to
might have.
interrupt
I
you.
might
Yeah.
have.
One more time, I'll be back.
Okay.
Bring her in. Yeah, no, she's written Kristen Harmel. She's written a lot of really good World War
Oh, was
II
that
books.
Kristen Harmon on that
I
one?
believe it was. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but
I
think
don't
that was
remember
it.
the author. I remember the story and that it was.
No,
I
love-
didn't know.
I love that
never
story.
knew about that part of. I guess. I mean, that should have been common sense. Like, of course they were going to take over
The wineries. Yeah.
the wineries, but I never had actually thought about that.
I know. That's what we
When
can
you
learn
hear
from
and learn
historical
about-
fiction.
When you learn about World War II, there's so much focus on all of the other horrible things that were
The
going
battles.
on. Yeah,
But there were many
battles and-
quiet battles, like saving
Right.
the wine caves from
Right.
the Nazis by camouflaging them, and they'd get spiders and they'd put them on top of the newly made barrier
To make it look old.
and then the spiders would weave webs and it looked old. Yeah.
Wow.
It was very cool.
Yeah, they really had to be innovative.
They were. Yeah, and then they took, they just bulldozed through lots of the wineries and just dug them up. Wineries that were several hundred years old.
Wow.
But I mean, France recovered gradually later, but the destruction was pretty bad at the time.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
the families
Lost everything.
Well, and then the young men were, most of them were conscripted for labor service in Germany. So the young men who would tend a lot of the farms.
Right, they didn't have anyone to actually work the land
Right,
anymore.
right. So there were so many layers of deprivation, that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, so many.
We just don't know
don't
until
really
we
think about it,
know,
or we don't
until we
know,
read about
yeah.
it. Yeah.
They teach us one version in school, and a lot of people don't ever. dig
History
further.
light.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, especially Europe. Now that it's been 80 years, that's the other thing. 80 years. Well, but World War II novels are at a high level of appreciation. So, yeah.
Well, Linda, I'm so glad that you joined us. I want to have more females on my podcast. I'm just always so busy. It seems that the guys take over. So it's nice to have a little girl circle here today and
Yes.
talking about something as important as this.
Yeah, it's always the guys. It's always all
I
guys
know.
on this.
We had to kick them out tonight, so it's nice for a change.
It was fun. My
The
friends,
woman takeover.
Yes,
my
that's
sister
right.
friends here.
Yes, and drinking good wine.
Oh, yes. French
Yes.
wine tonight.
French, yes, that's right. You are drinking the French wine.
Oh, you are?
Yes, how perfect is that? Anybody want any questions? Anybody had anything to say? Any topics we want to discuss since we're here?
Well, I will say that I dedicated the book to democracy itself. It's a bit in threat around the world, and it's, speaking of 80 years later, it's very painful to see that threat and the same forces of racism and prejudice in play as were in play in Europe in the 30s.
It is. It's,
Yeah.
And the
it's a
parallels
slippery
are
slope.
really, really frightening, and that's one reason I wrote the book. Is like, wait, it is what it is. That history is what it is, but there's parallels even when I started the book, which was now 5 years ago. Here we are in a slightly different era, but the dangers are actually
There are a lot
stronger.
of parallels, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a slippery slope. So it's
So the more people can understand what happened in the past and how did it turn out,
and it kind of helps me understand how today, in our world today, how people are so easily manipulated and follow the leader pretty much, and how easy it is, like I said, a slippery slope of losing democracy. How close have we come just in the past few years?
Oh, well.
The changes that are being made today, and I mean,
Don't get me started.
I feel like I feel like here we are
We could be
again.
here for hours.
Yeah. There's a
Well-
lot going on in the world today, and there's a lot of parallels.
As George Santayana says, he's at the top of my book in a quote, those who, I'm paraphrasing, but those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's very
That's a
true.
great quote.
And there's a dearth of
Very.
history in our school system and in our world. Most people don't know about most of this. I mean, I knew a lot about World War II because I'd read about it for about 40 years. But it was interesting to me. How could this happen? What happened? So I did a lot of reading before all this research. I had some context, but most people don't know much about that except that it happened and it was bad.
and all the propaganda, and the narrative seem similar today. On what?
Oh, it's chillingly similar.
right.
If you compare exact phrases, even.
Yeah, which is scary.
Very.
Which is scary. How easy we can lose our sense of democracy in this this country that we
Our-
thought
Our rights
was-
to democracy.
right. Absolutely. And that's a big deal.
Rights, yeah, well.
Rights.
And then
We
each
can
side,
talk
each
about
side-
rights, yeah.
Each side uses that word.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you for giving me your time and
Thank
coming
you.
on my little podcast here. I do plan on having more guests. We're just getting this started, so we will have more guests the next coming weeks. But please come and join us when we celebrate Linda's book. It is coming in July 22nd. It's going to be a huge French deal. We're going to be French themed and berets.
The party's the
and-
22nd, but what date is your actual book come out?
The book will come out on the 11th.
On the 11th.
which
so
is my
just-
birthday.
Oh, right. It's on her birthday.
It's my
That's
birthday.
your birthday present.
That's so
It was all meant to
exciting.
be that you walked into my bar. Look at that. It's a love story, you guys.
All
it's
the
a love
gin
story.
joints and all the places in the world. How can she walk into my bar?
And
Famous
I love it.
Casablanca.
Yes.
Someday I'm going to watch Casablanca with both of you.
Yes.
Yes,
I
I
haven't
should be
seen that in a
planning
long
to
time.
do that.
So I would love to
Definitely.
watch that again.
All right, thank you, Linda.
Thank you,
Thank
dear.
you, Liza, my sister, of course, for joining me. And we love
course.
Linda, so it was fun talking to her and sharing it with everybody who's listening and all my followers. And join us in July. That's all I got to say.
Thanks for the support and the love, and love
Well,
you too.
we love you,
We
Linda.
love you.
Linda
Love
Joy
you
Myers,
too.
you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, dear. Can I leave now?